There are horror soundtracks that we admire. There are horror soundtracks that unsettle us. And then there are those rare scores that stay with us forever. For me, Fabio Frizzi's score for Zombie 2 belongs firmly in that latter category. Welcome to Sounds of Horror, where we explore the music behind horror cinema's greatest nightmares. I'm Saul Muerte from Surgeons of Horror, and today we're examining a soundtrack that I consider to be not only one of the finest in Italian horror, but one of the greatest horror scores ever composed. Because while Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2 is rightly celebrated for its unforgettable imagery, it is Frizzi's music that truly haunts me. Released in 1979, Zombie 2 arrived during a transformative moment in horror cinema. George Romero had redefined the zombie with Dawn of the Dead, and Italian filmmakers were eager to capitalize on the genre's growing popularity. But rather than simply imitate Romero, Fulci forged his own path. Where Romero's zombies often served as social commentary, Fulci's undead feel ancient, mythic, and inescapable. They are less monsters than manifestation of death itself, and Fabio Frizzi understood that perfectly. Many horror soundtracks rely upon sudden musical stings to provoke immediate shocks. Frizzi takes on an entirely different approach. His score for Zombie 2 rarely startles. Instead, it envelops. Constructed from hypnotic bass lines, mournful melodies, pulsating synthesizers, and progressive rock influences, the soundtrack creates an atmosphere of suffocating dread. The music does not simply tell us when we are to be frightened. It suggests that fear is permanent. This is music as fatalism. Lucio Fulci's Zombies. The score advances relentlessly, patiently, and inevitably. One of the most fascinating aspects of Frizzi's score is its willingness to embrace sounds that at first glance seem entirely at odds with horror. Throughout Zombie 2, Frizzi incorporates distinctly Caribbean and reggae-inspired rhythms into the soundtrack, giving the film's tropical island setting. These musical flourishes firmly root the narrative within its geographical space. Yet rather than offering warmth or escapism, these rhythms create an unsettling tension. Reggae is traditionally associated with relaxation, spirituality, and communal celebration. Frizzi subverts these associations, juxtaposing laid-back grooves against images of decay, death, and the living dead. The result is deeply disorientating. It's as though paradise itself has become infected. This collision between familiar rhythms and horrific imagery contributes significantly to the film's uncanny atmosphere. The audience is never allowed to feel entirely comfortable because the music constantly destabilizes expectations. Equally striking is Frizzi's occasional use of dialogue excerpts and sonic fragments from the film itself. These sound bites blur the boundaries between score and sound design, creating what is almost dreamlike experience in which music, memory, and narrative bleed into one another. The soundtrack ceases to function simply as accompaniment. Instead, it becomes a haunted echo of the film itself. Long after the final frame, these musical and vocal fragments linger, like memories from a nightmare that refuses to fade. The central theme from Zombie 2 remains one of the most recognizable pieces of music in all of horror cinema. Beginning with an insistent electronic pulse before layering spectral keyboards and haunting melodic passages, Frizzi crafts something remarkable. Music that feels simultaneously propulsive and paralyzing. The rhythm drives the film forward while creating the sensation that the audience is trapped within an endless nightmare. Much like the undead themselves, the music moves forward but never truly progresses. The effect is hypnotic. We're not merely watching an apocalypse world unfold, we're being absorbed by it. For me, the theme represents the very essence of Zombie 2. Whenever I hear those opening notes, I'm instantly transported back to Fulci's decaying world. Few horror themes possess that power. One of the most iconic moments sees a zombie battle a shark beneath the ocean's surface. On paper, the sequence sounds absurd. On screen, it becomes strangely beautiful. Frizzi wisely avoids bombastic scoring. Instead, the cue unfolds with eerie restraint. The sparse instrumentation evokes the vast emptiness of the ocean, transforming what might have been exploitation spectacle into something dreamlike and uncanny. It's a perfect example of the creative partnership between Fulci and Frizzi. Together they transform the bizarre into the sublime. I first encountered Zombie 2 as a horror fan captivated by Fulci's notorious imagery. The eye-gouging scene, the rotting corpses, the sheer audacity of its violence. But over time it was Frizzi's music that kept drawing me back. Long after individual scenes have faded from memory, those hypnotic rhythms and melancholic melodies remained. That's the mark of a truly great soundtrack. It transcends the film from which it originated. And in this case, Zombie 2, the score has become every bit as iconic as the images themselves. Part of what makes Frizzi's score so compelling can be understood through philosopher Julia Kristeva's concept of the abject. Kristeva argues that horror emerges when boundaries collapse, life and death, self and other, human and non-human. Fulci's cinema is built upon that very principle. Bodies decompose, flesh ruptures, the distinction between life and death dissolves. Frizzi mirrors this process sonically. Traditional melody repeatedly gives way to repetition, drones and dissonance. The music itself appears to decay. In this sense, Zombie 2 is not merely accompanied by music, the score undergoes decomposition alongside the bodies on the screen. Zombie marks the beginning of one of horror cinema's great creative partnerships. Frizzi would continue collaborating with Fulci on films such as City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and The House by the Cemetery, helping define the sound of Italian horror through the early 1980s. Listening to Zombie 2 today, one can already hear the foundations of that unmistakable style. Melancholic melodies, hypnotic repetition, progressive rock influences, apocalyptic atmosphere. It is the sound of doom rendered beautiful. More than 4 decades later, Frizzi's work continues to influence composers and remains beloved by horror fans around the world. There are many great horror soundtracks. There are many great zombie soundtracks, but few capture the melancholy, dread and strange beauty of death quite like Fabio Frizzi's work on Zombie 2. More than 40 years after its release, I still find myself returning to this score, not simply as accompaniment to a film, but as a work of art in its own right. And perhaps that's the highest compliment one can pay to a horror soundtrack, because even separated from Fulci's extraordinary images, Frizzi's music still conjures nightmares. And for me, that's what makes Zombie 2 one of the greatest horror soundtracks ever composed. Until next time, listen carefully, because in horror cinema, death is rarely silent.